Good afternoon and welcome to the Museum of Perth and the WA Historical Cycle Club's Nullarbor Crossings, a history of challenge of adventure. My name's Toby and I'll be guiding today with our guests here, Rocket Rod Evans and Colin Ottaway. So we'd like to thank the Museum of Perth, the RACWA, the Bike Month and West Cycle and the Department of Transport. This session will be filmed. It's okay, those people in the audience will take your questions later, but you won't be filmed, so you'll be safe there. This will be available on our YouTube channel, so please have a look. There's plenty more content. Please check that out and subscribe. Today is 19th of November 2023. Just a check there for the filming. Okay. We will have questions at the end, so if you keep those in your mind to the end later on. Look, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the WAHCC of the Noongar Boodja, and also the Yalata people of the Western Desert and the Nullarbor, where these crossings have happened. And they call the Nullarbor the Unduri, or the waterless plain. And we welcome any traditional custodians who are with us today. Look, my personal experience of the Nullarbor was sitting in the back of a car having pillow fights with my sister as we crossed, listening to an 8-track cassette singing Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. So I go back a little way. But that's nothing like my esteemed colleagues here, Rod Evans and Colin Ottaway, who have done it by bike. So we might just keep straight to you, Rod. How many times? What was it like?
It's a bit hard to remember all the time. So I've driven it 6 times. I've driven a road train or a B-double across 5 times. And I've cycled it 4 times. So just in terms of the cycling, I went across once with part of the Around Australia record, and then in '93, when I was training for the World 24-hour record, I decided to ride home from a meeting in Adelaide. I decided that Air Highway was a bit boring, so I took a mountain bike in the early days of mountain bikes, and I went up and I rode the true Nullarbor. I rode basically following the railway line, and that was one hell of a journey. Anyway, I survived it, and then later on, February, March the following year, I did a double crossing. I wanted to go and see my parents who lived in Geelong, so I rode over, saw them, and then rode home again. So 4 times. Quite
Quite an event. And the Ken Evans bike we've got here on display, yeah. Which event was that related to?
So I've got 2 bikes here that have been across the Nullarbor. So this one was around Australia. So the story behind that was that was actually built for my father to race in Europe. And by Ken Evans, no relation, and then I borrowed it off Dad and modified it, and I suppose this was the start of my experimenting around cycling. So if you have a look at this bike, it's got 180 cranks on it, which were quite an experiment, and we might talk more about that later on. I put tri-bars on it, which actually were becoming quite fashionable in the triathlon industry, but nobody really used them in long distance. Now everybody uses them.
Thanks, Rod.
And then the other bike I've got over there, which is MH Jones, and it's been across twice. It's pretty much done a lot of other parts of Australia as well. Story behind that, I went to Milton in 1990 and I said, build me a bike out of water pipe, because I wanted the heaviest bike you could possibly build. So I got so used to training on a really heavy bike, eventually when I went to light bike, it was like being on a motorbike. Milton said, we actually don't build bikes out of water pipe, steel water pipe, but he said, I'll do the next best thing for you, and he built it out of tubing that's used for tandems, or was used for racing tandems on the track, so sprint tandems. I used to ride fixed wheel in those days. He built me 2 wheels for it. They were 40-spoke hubs, 40-spoke wheels, 27-inch. My theory was I could break 4 spokes and I'd still have a 36-spoke wheel. So yeah, that bike's probably seen a lot more on the Nullarbor than this one.
Fantastic. And Colin, yourself, it's your bike over there. Can you tell us how many times you've done the trip across?
Yeah, far less than Rod. Just the twice. So obviously on the bike in 2022, and that was a really good experience. And my only previous one was as a family when I was a 6-year-old, I think, across the Nullarbor in the back of the Falcon with the dad driving me and my sister across.
And so this is the bike that's won the Indian Pacific. Can you explain what the event is, the IndiPac?
Should get Damien to talk about this one. So The IndiPacs have came about in 2018, an event that Jesse Carlson created to ride across the country from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, so from Fremantle to Sydney or onto Bondi from there as well. He describes it as going across different sectors as well, so across the Nullarbor, through the mountains and through the major cities across the country.
And you were the winner last year.
I'm not really comfortable with that, but I rode across pretty quickly. I had a really nice time, and it was the first one to the Opera House, if you want to go that language, yeah.
And Colin, getting across the Nullarbor, what are the things that sort of kept you going mentally? I mean, it's an awful long way, and I have a sore bum after 100 k's. So
mentally, I was in a really good place. I don't actually remember a moment when I was battling or struggling or not happy or not comfortable. So then I'm trying to answer this one as well. And my year 12s, they're doing phys ed studies, and one of the things we talk about is mental skills, and we look at goal setting and relaxation, imagery, performance routine, self-talk, and I'm trying to relate that back. And I think probably goals. So I had a long-term goal to cross in 3 weeks to complete the journey thereabouts. So it's not a real smart goal, but it was a goal to get across in 3 weeks. And I think that sort of had me motivated and focused. And then obviously that was broken down into a daily goal, and each day it was, let's try and ride 300 k's over 15 hours. And as I was achieving those goals, I think my confidence tended to grow, and then this became believable. And because that increased confidence, I was continually able to ride each day.
And keep pushing.
Yeah.
And Rod, you've had the passion for the Nullarbor a few times. And so what got you going in the trip across?
Well, first of all, I don't know whether I've got a passion about the Nullarbor. I just got a passion about being on a bike and exploring interesting places, because I've also ridden across the central Australian desert as well, which is from Steep Point to Byron Bay. And it's interesting you ask the question, because you'd think after 40 or 50 years I should have an answer for it, and I don't. But I can sort of tell you how I got started, and I can tell you the advice other people gave me to help me get through the moments that Colin was talking about. Like, first of all, how I got started. I was brought up in the country, out on a farm. Nobody was driven to school. You either walked or you rode. In the earlier days, you went on horse, but in my days, you either rode a bike or walked. It was 1 mile to school. The first day, my dad took me to school. The second day, he took me to the end of the driveway, which is 400 or 500 metres. He pointed me in the direction of school, and there's a tricycle here today that's actually been run over by a car, but that was a tricycle I rode to school, and I just started riding to school and riding home. And then when I eventually moved into town to school, which was Geelong, which was 16 kilometres away, or 10 miles in those days, I still kept on riding. So I just kept on riding, and then at the age of 15, and don't ask me why my parents ever let me do this, but they put me on a train, because I wanted to ride from Adelaide to Geelong. They put me on a train during the Easter holidays. I took the train over as a young kid with a bike and so much gear. I had gear for if somebody invited me out for dinner that night. I had a good shirt and good shoes and nice trousers and a jacket. Nobody ever did. I had tin food in case I couldn't find a shop. I had everything. I was absolutely loaded up. But I rode back and I just thought, wow, like how cool is this? And so that's what got me into it. Obviously, and we've all had it, had these bad times. And in 1990, I'd been awarded Australian Cyclist of the Year, and I met up with Sir Hubert Opperman for the first time. And I was talking to Oppie about these moments during my Round Australia record. It sounds like Colin, you're a lot more organised than I was, but I had some bloody terrible times. And anyway, I said to him, how do you get through them? And he said, look, Rod, he said, when you're at your darkest moment, that moment when you're really ready to give up, that's the moment that you're closest to victory. And that's had a huge impact on me. But the better story, he said to me, he sort of looked me in the eye and he said to me, Rod, it's not that hard. And I sort of looked back at him and he said, look, Rod, all you've got to do, and this has stuck with me ever since, all you've got to do is when the pedal comes to the top, push it down. And when it comes to the top again, push it down. And I don't know how many times, and there's plenty of people in the room here that will have had these moments, you get to that single stroke and wow, it works. Just if the pedal comes to the top, push it down and just hang around until the other one comes to the top and then push it down. So that's how I got through.
And look, and you're referring to Hubert Opperman, who rode across Australia in 1937 and was aiming to set the record. And there's been quite a few people doing that sort of thing. So you've got the mental, you showed us how you've got the mental powerhouse, the goal setting, and the general, and the more pushing of that pedal down.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Colin, do you want to share us how you do it, and a bit about your bike, a bit about how the day went, day to day, out there on the road.
Yeah, two parts. So the bike was a straight off the shelf Defy, so Giant's endurance bike, which is largely made for comfort, and that was my whole philosophy around there as well. I wanted to be comfortable when I was riding, so I could ride for a long day and multiple days as well. The setup was pretty standard. I guess the only change I made was to put the hubs on there, the dynamo hubs, so I could ride as long as I wanted to. I wasn't limited by light or powering my devices there as well. Beautiful, really happy at how that performed and everything I was carrying. The day-to-day, so I had the idea that I was going to try and sleep 7 hours a night because that's what I was doing all summer. Like the 10 till 5 was my sleep time and everything else was around there. So that left me 15 to 17 hours of riding with minimal stuffing around time to eat and photos and all those things as well. So I can take you through a day, and I'll start probably at night time because it sort of sets that scene, and I'd roll into wherever I was sleeping. That picture there, I think, has got me at the Nullarbor Roadhouse in a bathroom there. So I'd typically roll in and I'd air out I'd take my clothes off, my cycling clothes, air them out as best I could for the next day and start thinking about how it was going to look. So that was, I'd get onto map progress and see where the route was taking me, and have the route sheet to figure out where I was going to make my lunch stops, food stops, etc. as required, and I'd probably apply some chain lube to my chain overnight, and I'd sleep as best as I could for what was pretty much going to be 7 hours. I'd wake up generally before my alarm, but if I woke up and it was appropriate time, I'd pull out the plug out the air mattress and the pillow while I was still lying on it to help it deflate, and made sure I woke up. Stuffed that in my bag and then stuffed it into my saddlebag, and off I went for the day. When I could get the opportunity, I'd stop and buy some food and drink, and it was very much fuel at that stage. Whatever was in the Bain Marie and semi-warm would do, a couple of chopped milks, and I'd ride on, and next time I could stop, I'd stop, buy some more food, eat some more food, drink some more stuff, and off I'd ride again. And then probably, as I sort of thought about the goals for the day, I'd had an idea about where I was going to head, the 300 Ks or thereabouts, where'd be a likely spot to stop for the night. And I'd just sort of investigate what it was going to look like, and we'd use Wikicamps, I'd use Wikicamps to figure out if there was going to be a bench or water available or a toilet or anything that'd be a really nice source of shelter. I can see some of the ultra riders around here have done something real similar as well. So figure out what was going to be the best spot for me to stop for the night, and then plan out from there. So it was quite a simple process: ride, eat, sleep, and repeat.
And it does sound like this. It sounds like the adventure unfolds in front of you. And so,
yeah, so as we said, I've only crossed that Nullarbor once as a young fella, so I had no recollection of what it was looking for, and I'd sort of received some kind of advice of sorts the year before from Rowan, who rode across and was quite an experienced rider, and he was very much along the idea of don't plan too much, have a rough idea, but if you're not reaching those goals you can get some real disappointment, or if you actually over succeed you might force yourself to stop when you're not it's not the appropriate time to stop. So yeah, it was wonderful, and I did very little research in the route or the destinations as I was riding. So sometimes it was a surprise, whether it was a Nullarbor or over in the eastern states, the hills. They not surprised me, but they were big.
And you've got a highlight from the Nullarbor itself. We're thinking that the treeless plain. Is there something maybe sad happened?
Yeah. Happy. I was doing what I wanted to do for a few weeks. So I was riding my bike, and there was no stresses, there was no time pressures or anything on me at all. So that was wonderful. And then favourite time, I'm not sure, Rod, when your favourite time of the day to ride is, but sunrise was beautiful, sunset was beautiful, nighttime was beautiful, and daytime was wonderful. So I can't narrow it down to when it was best. I've got reasons for each of them being wonderful. The sense of adventure in the morning, or the sunset, and even nighttime you feel like a bit of a rebel past your curfew and things like that when it becomes quiet. So that was it was just really nice and spectacular riding. And then if you go with the sads, they're not really sads, but Nullarbor Roadhouse, I was inexperienced. I expected to, it started to rain, so it was beautiful when I left Border Village, real nice sunset. The clouds were clear, there was nothing in the sky apart from the stars. And the rain came, And then I rolled into Nullarbor Roadhouse and I assumed it would be open, but it wasn't open. So I was pretty hungry by that stage, and I only had some jerky left in my saddlebag, so I had some jerky for dinner. And I wanted to have a shower, but I was ready for a shower, and I realised you had to pay coins to have a shower, but I didn't take any coins, so I lay there, well, dried off and had a sleep. Truckie came in during the night, and I must have said something to him, because as he left, he put a couple of gold coins there, so I got to have a shower in the morning, and that was good. And then in the morning, I got up at my 5 o'clock, and then I was ready to go, and then the Roadhouse wasn't open for food until 7 o'clock, so I was waiting, twiddling my thumbs, took some extra photos. Yeah, so it was a learning experience, but it was a funny, sad, and the other one was Nundra as well. I was looking forward to a curry because everyone said, get the curry, the Indian family's taken over, it's wonderful. So I've gone to Nundra Roadhouse, I could smell the curry, and I got there and he's gone, hey Colin, I was waiting for you. So he's dot watcher, that was wonderful, and that blew me away, that was the first experience there. But I said, can I have a curry? He said, oh, that family, they just took the last one. So I had a Chico roll, I think. And so I learnt from that. I learnt don't be craving or expecting anything when you roll up. You be prepared for anything, and what's there is a bonus. So it was a low light, but nothing too bad.
Teaching you, wow. And Rod, you got a highlight? Maybe.
Well, it's interesting hearing Colin speak, because there's a few things that absolutely totally agree with you. Because I think when you're on a bike doing these long rides, you're a magnet for adventure. Like, people come up to you, things happen around you. And I used to always start the day, Colin, with the idea that today, it didn't matter what time I started, if it was 3 in the morning or 6 or whatever, today I'm going to have something really bad happen, which I'm going to hate, and I'm going to have something really good happen, which I never expected. And like, just thinking of a story, like basically how many days have I written? I've got sort of like a couple of thousand stories now where I can tell you, but I'll give you an example. And I actually found that the magnet worked best when you actually weren't trying to break a record. It actually worked best when you were just cruising along and let the world come to you. So I was riding over to see Mum and Dad, and I left Port Augusta in the morning, and I got down to a place called Tarawa in South Australia, and I was getting hammered. There was a southerly blowing, it was a hot day. I roll into Tarawa. Tarawa now is basically like Calabarin with a bushfire, like it's completely finished, but in those days it was quite a bit of a town. It was like Calabarin in the heyday. And anyway, I roll into town, and on the right hand side was quite a modern cafe, you know, with all the goods, and on the left hand side was a place that, have you ever seen that show called Open All Hours with Ronnie Barker? It looked like that. So over to Ronnie Barker's place. So I pull up in front of it, and it looked more like a grocery store, but he had a sign out the front which said pies and cokes for sale. So that, and as wherever, Adrian, you know, whenever I'm in trouble, mate, I always have a pie and cake. And anyway, so what happened was that I pulled in, and the guy that was running it was like Ronnie Barker, but probably 20 years older. Like, he was a really, really old guy. And unfortunately, when I'd pulled in, he'd received his only delivery of the week, which was a wooden box full of groceries. And it was more important that he unpacked that wooden box than actually served me. So I hung around for ages as he slowly went round, bananas here, onions here. And then finally he came up to me and he asked me what I wanted. And I said, I'd love a pie. And he said, yep, I can do that. Now, what I didn't realise is that his concept of giving me a pie was different to my concept. His concept was that he had them in the deep freeze frozen, and he would be able to heat one up for me. My concept was they'd be in a bain-marie and I'd be able to eat it straight away. Anyway, so I hung around as he pulled this meat pie out of the deep freeze. Then there was a second problem. That is, he didn't have an electric stove, he only had a wood stove. And the wood stove wasn't alight. So he now gathered together a whole lot of little kindling, stuffed it in this wood stove and lit it. And he obviously realised I was pretty tired, so he then ushered me over to a table, which is sort of his work desk. And about 6 months of receipts and bank statements and everything got pushed to the side, and that's where I'm sitting. And then I think he eventually decided that, you know, this poor guy, he's waiting a long time for his meat pie. So he really cranked up the wood stove. He really put the wood on. Finally, my pie arrives, and he'd managed to burn the outside of it and keep the inside frozen. So I'm now sitting down. then the next thing he does, he said, "You want something to drink with that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love a Coke." And he said to me, "Oh yeah, things go better with Coke." Now I don't know if you remember back in the 1980s, there was a slogan, "Things go better with Coke," and he was really proud that he was modern enough to know this slogan. So he got me a Coke in a glass bottle, and served me that, and then sat opposite me, and then basically started telling me these most amazing stories. So anyway, I ate the pie and Coke, and sorry, I won't hold you up, Toby, but I ate the pie and Coke, and then thanked him for his stories about, you know, how to run a dray team to pull a dam and all that sort of stuff. And then I headed off, and as I was going out the door, he said, "Oh, hang on, Rod, hang on, I've got something for you." Now, as I say, you're attracted adventure, and I've had some amazing stuff given to me by people I've met when I've stopped at country towns. Anyway, he said, "Oh, come back inside." So I was expecting him to give something to me, and he handed over a visitor's book, and he asked me whether I'd signed the visitor's book, and I signed it, and I left the store thinking, this is an amazing shop that it's got a visitor's book. Because obviously things aren't that busy. So it was just moments like that just every day something like that happened, and you just go, wow, what a great time. I'm happy.
The sense of adventure really comes across, and the I'm a little sidetrack there. Just a moment. There we go. How did I skip a whole page? Look, looking around the exhibition, there are some fantastic heroic stories of people doing adventuring and things. And I think that there is just this Australian passion for the Nullarbor and this mythical thing. And I noted that in 1933 account by William Davidson that there was this thing that was drawing them towards the west and drawing people along to do the ride. And I think the stories and the experiences you had are obviously part of that. So I just want to delve into, and this one's off the script we discussed, just want to bring up the rain. Rod, you talked about the experience of 2 weeks in the rain when you went around Australia. Can we just focus on that one there? Yeah,
look, I can definitely tell that story, but I also, just to reflect on the comment you made before, that when you look at the history of long distance cycling, and I ended up contributing to a book that you may get to see later on, which where I went and researched all the things. There's actually different phases of why people were riding across the Nullarbor, and the initial phase is just simply because they basically want, like myself. I'm living in Perth. I want to go and see my parents in Geelong, so I just ride over. One of my neighbours in the late, I'd never met him, but in the late 1890s, he rode from Kalgoorlie to Geelong because he wanted to marry a girl. And that's just how you did it. You either rode or you caught the ship. That were just the two things. And then I think there was an era later on, which was the sort of the Oppie era, and then even a little bit later on the Ernie Old era. You know, those guys. Oppie. You know, they were just trying to make money, and perhaps I can comment on that. And then later on, you know, there's our era. You know, I was the start of it, you're the finish of it. You know that. We're just self-indulgent egotists, and and it was interesting. Sorry, I don't want to hold you up, but I spoke to Oppie in 1994. I was at his house, and we were talking about what might be the next record I do. And I said to him, "Look, I'm sort of thinking about doing this record for a year of cycling, which at that stage was still held by Tommy Goodwin in 1949. He'd ridden 121,000 k's in a year. Anyway, Oppie took me into another room away from everybody else and basically got into me big time about, you know, don't do this, it will kill you. And he said to me, "Rod, what you don't understand is that in our era, we did these ridiculous things because that's how we lived." Like Ozzie Nicholson, when he broke the 1 year record in 1993 and then later on again in 1997, he did it because he was poor. And the guy eventually died of pauper. So, sorry, I've digressed, but I just think there's different motivations and different things. As for rain, that was one of my bad times. So basically, I rolled in, when I was doing the Around Australia record, rolled into Ceduna. Big dark clouds came over the horizon, and it started raining by the time I got to Ceduna. What I didn't realise, it was going to keep on raining from Ceduna to Brisbane. So it was nearly sort of 14 days of rain. what you've got to remember in those days, and there's plenty of people in the room that will relate to this, we just didn't have the rain gear that you've got these days. I had a big canvas sail, that I'd put on, that folded up as about the size of a small sleeping bag. When it rained, you got wet. I really struggled. I got saddle sores, ended up having to mask. I got masking tape, ran that down my backside to hold the skin together, just because your skin was falling apart. I don't know if you've ever been in a bath for a long period of time, you know how soft your skin gets. Well, you're sitting on a saddle for 20 hours a day, 20 hours a day, and so it was all pulling apart. So I had some pretty psychotic episodes after my record about rain. I just couldn't ride the rain. Yeah, I just really struggled, mate.
You talked about what it was like for your experience in the rain. I think it's 40 years, a bit of a time gap and time warp between you two, between the 80s and a couple of years back. We just want to talk about, because every cyclist is looking to go faster, go better. So I just thought I'd talk about maybe some of the things that came across that, to try and get you lighter, faster, stronger. Colin.
Yeah.
What was in your mind there?
I'll first contrast that with your wet weather gear as well, because I had a nice jacket and it was packed down, fits inside my jersey pocket, breathes really well and kept me dry. I had waterproof, I had 2 pairs of socks, I had my waterproof socks and my normal socks, and my feet stayed dry, and the chamois and the bike shorts were really good, so I didn't have any of that issue with it, which was, that's that 40-year gap as well, how materials have evolved. But then in the lighter sense there as well, you want to take only what you need, I guess, since it's solo and unsupported, so every gram that you're carrying is something that you have to accelerate and get up to speed. So I took that 1 pair of bibs, which ripped halfway across, and I couldn't get the pair that I wanted ordered in, so I was wearing with my bum cheek out the whole time. The sleep system was light and compact, and that's probably where I spent that money, because I wanted to make sure I was sleeping well, but I wanted something that was light and was easy to use and reliable and durable in that sense. And the spare clothes was only what I thought I would need, and everything is a fair bit better, with the down stuff that we get now, and the merino was light and breathable and compact, so it could fit inside that handlebar bag quite easily there as well. Lightness, it's not a particularly light bike. By modern terms, it's probably significantly lighter than anything you rode, but what would you go there? I mean, there were long spells. If we're going for 200 k's without water, then several times I was carrying 6 to 8 kilos of mass. So the focus on reducing mass wasn't necessarily one of mine, because I understood there was going to be weight that I was going to carry around the place. But the bike itself was very efficient all the way to allow me to pedal pretty quickly and comfortably.
And Colin, look, I've got to read this out of length. Where you were experimenting with quite a few things. You're looking at crank length, caffeine, hypnosis, and other mind-altering strategies. Mind-altering strategies? What were you up to?
So I guess what I learned fairly early on is that I wasn't a good enough cyclist to break world records. I'd been in Victorian teams, I'd won Victorian titles, but to step up to break a record that nobody else has done is quite a step up. And I just didn't have the natural ability to do it. I'm an asthmatic. I've got a school report at home which my wife read to me the other day, and actually I failed sport at school, so really didn't get off to a good start. And so I decided to go pretty radical, and I'd read about a guy called Jan Carlsen who turned SAS Airlines around the early 80s. He wrote a book called Moments of Truth, and in that he said, look, if you want to improve something by 1,000%, it's really hard to just get one thing and improve it by 1,000%. But he said if you take 1,000 things, you'll be able to improve them by 1%. And I basically then just broke up every aspect of mental training, physical training, equipment, logistics, and I broke it down, and I had 1,000 things. I don't know whether I literally had 1,000 things, but I had a lot of things. And to give you some examples, you are right, I did get into mind-altering states. I was very, very determined not to take drugs, and that's another thing. I actually was in a bike race where drug taking was fairly prolific, and I'd had the opportunity to take some drugs, and I did. And then I pulled out of the race because I thought it's not for me. Lost my train of thought. So then I experimented with everything else, and I thought that there's a possibility of changing your mind just as powerfully as drugs. And I watched a show one night of a guy who'd hypnotised somebody, and they were eating an onion and they thought it was a sweet peach. I go, whew, this is interesting. So I went to a hypnotist in Midland, and I had a specific idea in my mind, and that was if he could hypnotise me not to have to go to the toilet for 24 hours. Because I thought that, because the 24-hour record, it's this downtime, you know, just having to get off the bike and stop, you know, or sleep or whatever. Hey, just get hypnotised and don't have to do it. So I spoke to this hypnotist about it, and first of all, he thought I was a nutcase. He goes, what? You know, because his previous patient obviously had been weight loss or not smoking or whatever. Now this guy doesn't want to go to the toilet. When I eventually explained it to him, he said, you know what, Rod, there's something much more powerful. And he said, it's self-hypnosis. And he said, look, just stand there for a moment. As soon as he put his hand on my shoulder, I fell to the ground. I don't know what happened. I sort of felt as if I'd tripped over something. And I stood up and I said, oh, sorry about that. And he goes, no worries. And he put his hand on my shoulder again, fell to the ground. He said, you are the easiest guy to hypnotise I've ever met. So he taught me how to hypnotise myself. And so that was one thing. So I experimented with everything from the impact of music. Researchers have now actually proven what I found by just booking the velodrome at 10:30 at night and going out and playing different music and seeing how it affected the speed on my computer. And I found certain music actually impacted me in certain ways. Eventually I learnt that there was certain music that the support crew could play to lift me, so there's that sort of thing. It's probably a story that I don't feel comfortable telling you here, but in full detail, but I'll tell you in code, is that Bill Begg got onto the idea of using libido as a forward predictor of whether you're overtraining or not. And so he used to quiz my wife basically on how things were going at home, and we used to use that in training as well. So obviously if I'm frisky, I'm not training hard enough, and if I'm tired, I'm training too hard. And hey, don't use it yourselves, because I'm a professional athlete. But anyway, so I just did heaps of that, and it's called, it's now called aggregation of marginal gains. The British cycling people started using it, but it was just an incredibly powerful tool. And I basically got 1,000 stories of all the different things that I played with.
Did you, what about bike enhancements? Obviously the tri-bars, we talked about those.
Yes, yeah, look, I did a lot of things that actually proven now to be incorrect. So I went to 180 cranks, which I'd already been experimenting with. Now the science is 180 cranks actually don't work. The shorter cranks, the actual traditional 172s, you know, sort of 7.25 inch cranks are the way to go. I rode an Allsop bike, which was the most aerodynamic bike you could get at the time. It had a beam on it. I should have realised that bike actually wasn't faster than a normal bike, because one day my Allsop bike, I crashed it. And so I was riding my spare bike, it was just a normal diamond frame. And I actually thought, this diamond frame bike's actually better, but because I hadn't spent any money on it, and I spent all my money on the Allsop still got the ride. Looking back on it, I made a mistake. So there was a lot of equipment stuff. I experimented with cooking chains with Newline, all sorts of stuff, and some of this stuff's now done, some of it wasn't.
And you mentioned to me LSD.
Yeah, so LSD, which is not the drug.
Oh.
So what happened was that I was really interested about going back and thinking about how other athletes have been trained, and I'm a massive fan of Percy Cerutty, absolutely love the guy to bits. But who trained Herb Elliott? Do you remember that Percy Cerutty story? And Arthur Lydiard, who I'm probably not as big a fan of, who was basically Percy Cerutty's counterpart in New Zealand. I looked at all these guys and how they looked at training their athletes, and then worked out what of that could I take over into cycling. And it ended up that it was Fausto Coppi, the Italian cyclist who won the various tours back in the 1940s, who spoke of LSD, long slow distance. And I thought, I think there's something in that, and also it suited my mentality. I suspect it might suit you as well. You're not that keen, Colin, on doing intervals, but if you and I went for a long ride, you'd be happy as Larry. And so basically I just got a fixed wheel bike, which is what I trained on, and I just did heaps of 300 and 400k rides. So I was basically riding 1,000 k's a week. I would ride everywhere. I'd have to go to a meeting in Sydney, I'd ride to Sydney. I'd just ride everywhere. And I had a claim to fame, which is not a claim to fame because people have proved it incorrect. But at one stage I used to say to people, I've ridden through every town and city in the southern half of Australia. And the only reason I don't say that now is because people have named towns and cities I haven't ridden through. But I tell you what, there's not many I haven't ridden through, or very close to. And it was all LSD, just long, slow distance.
Wonderful. Look, and we both talked about sleep and the importance of it. I mean, sleeping in the toilet, mind-altering sleep. I think now might be a good time to drop the story that we talked about Oppie.
Yes. So
Hubert Opperman.
Yeah. So I'd caught up with Oppie, and I was talking to him about some of the thoughts I was having around sleep, or some of the research I was doing about REMs and all sorts of different things, and how we could completely change the landscape of the distances long-distance cyclists could ride. And Oppie said it was interesting when he did the 1937 Cross Australia ride, that one of the big challenges in that era was how much sleep could you force a cyclist to go without before you actually force them into a psychotic state or even killed them. And he told me the story about how he was riding across Australia, and I don't know if you know a lot about Bruce Small, but who founded Melbourne Star Cycles and manager of Oppie, but Bruce Small was really tough guy. If you go back through history, everybody who was involved in, he was a real commercial, hard-nosed guy. And so he was pushing Oppie like there was no tomorrow to get across Australia. And then eventually Oppie started complaining about how tired he was getting, and Oppie said, look, you've got to let me get off the bike. I need 8 hours sleep absolutely desperately. And Bruce goes, no, keep going. And then Oppie just started complaining. And Bruce started thinking, there's a chance I'm going to kill this guy. And so Bruce decided to get him off his bike. So he pulls Oppie off the bike, and Oppie gets in the car. And as soon as he gets in the car, he falls asleep. You know that feeling when you're so tired you just fall straight asleep. And then Bruce gets Oppie's watch, and he winds it forward 7 hours, 50 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, he wakes Oppie up. And then Oppie looks at his watch and, he's had his 8 hours sleep. And so he gets back on his bike. Now we've got an interesting scenario, because as Oppie's explaining to me, Oppie now felt as if he'd had 8 hours sleep, and Bruce knew he'd only had 10 minutes. So Bruce is still worried he's going to kill the guy. But what happened on Oppie's side was that Oppie felt brilliant. He felt fantastic. And so he just kept on riding, and eventually he said to Bruce, he said, I told you, all I needed was 8 hours sleep and I'll be fine. And Bruce said to him, are you sure? And Oppie said, yeah, I feel really, really good. And Bruce goes, well, how come you're weaving all over the road? And Oppie looked back at him and said, mate, it's not me, it's all these other bloody cyclists. So Oppie said, yeah, you just got to be careful about how much sleep you decide to go without. And I don't know if you had hallucinations, but I certainly did.
I've managed my sleep quite well. Maybe next time.
Look, and before we go to the question and answer, I'd just like to summarise summarise the morning. Look, Rod's an adventurer and obviously meeting a lot of people, and that's been very important in your travels and things. Thank you for your stories there. And Colin, your can-do attitude has been amazing. Look, I just want to ask you, do you think that I could do it, Colin? If I got my act together, could I ride across?
I do think, and I've said this multiple times, if you've got the desire and therefore the time, I think anyone can. It's a great adventure, and I think you really enjoy it as well, and I reckon you'll be capable as well, if that's what you want.
Thank you very much. Look, I'd like to thank the Museum of Perth, the WA Historical Cycle Club, and everyone in the audience for being part of today. We will break in a moment to go for a Q&A, but if we could thank Rod and Colin. Wonderful. Thank you. how we're going to run the Q&A is that we'll get hands up and I'll head out to the questions there and put the guys under the microscope and go from there. I will, if you ask a question, then I'll rephrase it so that it goes into the microphone, and then we'll go from there. We've got one at the back there, thanks.
Oh, the Struggle Race 7 at Anna.
Yeah.
Most people, that's a lifetime achievement to do that once, like finish that once. It is incredible. And you went around and did it twice in one day.
So,
did you find that at all hard?
So we've just been asked whether Colin doing the gravel race 7, doing 2 laps, is that right?
Yeah. So everyone in the room familiar with 7? Yeah. So a couple of 100 k's, a lot of elevation and off-road with mud at Nannup. They put it, I've done it previously, and they put it as a joke post. I think anyone want to do 14 next year, and I thought, yeah, because I've got so much confidence from my riding and the ability to ride all day, I think yes, I could do that. So I sent them emails and they said, yeah, that's all right, go for it if you want. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be supported, I'm fine, look, I'll be all right. And then I got my mate who rides very well as well, a very different rider. And we rode around the course twice. We did our first lap, had lunch, and then went and did it at night time, or the second one in the afternoon, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's that sense of adventure, the things that you get to do and see and explore. And yeah, the body was good and the bike was good. It was a fun one.
Were you the other chap who did it with him?
No.
No? Go on then. Frank?
I know cyclists that will go on a 30k ride and they'll spend $40 on gels and protein bars and whatever and come back with more carbs in or more energy in them before they actually depart on the ride. Colin, you haven't mentioned any gels or energy bars or whatever. And Rod, what's your experience? Because you came through a phase, I believe, where there wasn't caffeine in use, and then I believe you mentioned that you started using it.
So Frank was just asking him what diet you were running on, gels and things, and then also Rod, what you were doing for food. Thank you.
So I'll talk about my normal riding in campo here. This is the Terminator, because if any ride less than 100 k's, I don't tend to take a water bottle or some food or anything like that. Over 100 k's, I'll probably take some water, and I don't. Back to 7, I didn't take any gels that day. I try and eat real food of some sorts, but I'm pretty lucky. I've got no intolerances or beliefs on food, so I could eat whatever I wanted. I ate what I could, when I could, and like I said, it'd be a couple of chopped milks a day. You get that, the high protein and the high liquid content from those sort of drinks in that sense. So no gels or anything on that crossing. I did have a couple spare emergency, probably that psychological was there if I need them. But then Amanda will say they met me in Sydney, and then when we finished, I was obviously in deficit because I had 18 Weet-Bix. I went 5, 5, 4, 4. So 18 Weet-Bix for a sitting in the morning. So I was craving some real carbohydrates, I think.
Yeah, I was on the cusp of the new generation. So in 1992, a guy called Hans Tholstrup, who's the guy that went around Australia in a dinghy, a bit of an adventure. He and Dick Smith jumped 18 motorbikes in a bus at the time when everybody was jumping buses in motorbikes. And he came up with this idea of this Cross Australia mountain bike race, which was going to go from Steep Point to Byron Bay. And he was going to get the best elite ultramarathoners in the world to come and compete in it, and I was fortunate to be invited. And I remember early on in that race, the Americans had this product they called goo, which was like a liquid sort of stuff, and mate, it was just like rocket fuel, and it was really the start of the gels. It was they hadn't really been invented at that stage, they were playing with it, and yeah, I just thought this isn't going to be a new era, and it was. Just on Frank's point about the caffeine, when I was racing, and you know my attitude about drugs, and it actually destroyed some opportunities I had to race in Europe because of my position on drugs. But the caffeine, you weren't allowed to take caffeine. Now there's, you know, the guys dope open it like there's no tomorrow. But you weren't allowed to take caffeine, and you might remember Alex Watson. If you go way back, it was the equestrian guy. He got actually banned from the Olympics for taking caffeine, which was equivalent of about 4 cups of coffee. So that was happening in my era. So I thought to myself, and this is my aggregation of marginal gains, 1,000 things theory, I thought, I wonder if you actually go off caffeine for a long period of time, and then you just give yourself the legal minimum dose. So I went off it for 3 months. Didn't eat chocolate, didn't drink tea, coffee. I didn't go near anything that had to do with caffeine. Very, very strict on it. And then I did a 300k training ride, and I went out and I really hammered myself. And I got to 2J, had 100k's to come home, and then I took a no-dose tablet, which is the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee, I think. Which anyway, it's under the legal limit at that stage. Mate, I was wired. I was seriously wired. I was big chain ring, small cog at the back, absolutely hammered home as if it was some sort of bike race. And I actually used that. And I got drug tested all the time, but I used to go off it and then just give myself a hit. And the drug testing people, they didn't know. I was wired. So, that was sort of the stuff that I experimented with. But yeah, I just sort of started that era, and perhaps you didn't play with it. Round Australia record, I just ate normal things. I eat Weet-Bix for breakfast. That seems to be a staple diet. I'd eat pasta for lunch, pasta for afternoon. For evening, I'd have a meat pie and a Coke in the afternoon, which I have to have. But I used to also eat sandwiches. And one day the support crew, I had 2 backpackers who were my support crew, and they started complaining about how many sandwiches they were making. And I go, I don't think I'm eating that many sandwiches, because I'm having all these other big meals. And they go, no, Rod, you're seriously eating a lot of sandwiches. So the next day we counted them, and I was eating a loaf of bread or sandwiches a day. So yeah, I think for all of you that are into long distance riding, you're going to really relate to this. You can pack it in. And unfortunately, when you get to my age, it's hard to stop doing it.
I can't believe there's no more. Yes, sir.
Right, I remember back after those attempts, I think you walked across the Nullarbor. How did that compare to riding?
Yeah, so I then started another phase of my life, which, you and I used to joke about, the Adventurers Club. I think you used to say that you were going to set up the Wanderers Club. What I found from when I'd started cycling as a young boy is that the sense of going out on the road and actually not seeing people had gone. Like, there was a lot of cars on the road. And I was just craving that environment where there weren't other people around you. So in 1997, a mate of mine, Neil Dowling, who was a journalist with the Sunday Times, he rang me up and he was having a midlife crisis. And he said, everybody in their life's got to do something where when you go to the pub, you can go, did you know that I did so-and-so? And he said, what do you reckon I did so-and-so thing should be? And I gave him a whole lot of ideas, which he completely rejected. And then finally, he said to me, my did you know I did something idea is going to be something that I'm going to do with you. So what will you do? And I said to him, you know what? I don't reckon anybody, seriously, anybody has walked across the Nullarbor, like the real Nullarbor, in the centre of the Nullarbor, up near the railway line. Because basically you've got to carry 3 weeks of food and water, because there's no water out there, no food out there, and it's tough going. And I'd already cycled through there, so I knew it was tough going. So yeah, what happened was Neil and myself headed off, and on probably the biggest adventure of my life, because we nearly killed ourselves, and walked across. And then I got really passionate about walking, so I walked from Derby to Kununurra twice. So I've done a lot of sort of desert walks later on, and because I loved that isolation where you go days and days and then you'd meet somebody and that person would be absolute eccentric, and it was just so great, that interaction. I just loved it. Hermits just living out there. And even on the Nullarbor, I don't know if they're still there, I met 2 hermits out on the real Nullarbor. I took the air highway, it's just been the air highway, but the real Nullarbor, and they were living out there, and they were just the most amazing people I've ever met.
So I've got a brief question to that question, if you don't mind. The water, you're obviously not drinking much water, so you take 3 weeks worth of water on you. How much water a day you take when you're walking and when you're riding?
I'll just paraphrase that for the camera. How much water were you taking for these trips?
Yeah, so there's sort of theories about water, as you know, about 10 litres per man per day and all those sort of things. But I've found it's about 6 to 7, depending on the climate, that you can get away with these desert walks. So we basically carried 1/4 of a tonne of gear each in these carts, and that's actually what set up the adventure, because we built these carts having no idea actually how to build a cart. Neil built his using mountain bike wheels. Probably 5 days in, his wheels completely smashed. So we put all the stuff in my cart and then took turns pulling my cart. And then my cart I'd built out of wheelbarrow, out of bricky trolley wheels, because I remember when I cycled through there how sandy it was. What I hadn't remembered was how rocky it was, because on the mountain bike I didn't feel the rocks as much as I felt the sand. And then I blew a set of bearings out of one of my wheels. So yeah, we're in the middle of Nullarbor with about a quarter of a tonne of gear and no carts. And anyway, we walked out by making using trousers to make backpacks and putting jerrys in that, and walked out and found a mine site and got some new bearings brought out and went back out and rebuilt our carts and walked across.
That's the Nullarbor. This is quite amazing. Question in front?
Yeah, so my question relates to how you feel about the post-ride blues. Like when we do ultra endurance events, we're on this endorphin high like the whole time, and then we finish these big events, these massive achievements. I'm interested in your reflections, both your reflections on how you handle that kind of come off the big endorphin rush and knowing that the event was over and you were having a break.
Yeah. Well, I've got
just been asked about that post-event blues and some.
Well, let Colin go and then I've got some thoughts too.
Yeah, you cautioned me about that, Damien, as well. And it's an interesting one because I don't have a next goal, and I don't know if it's because I was still on such a high from such an amazing event, or it just was an achievement that I was really proud of. And I mean, we were in Sydney for a few weeks, and I was still riding every day. I was like, well, let's get up, my bike's here, let's explore. So I was still riding my bike, and I think it's translated into sort of that 7 event or a 24-hour event or some of the other local events that I'm really enjoying, and I don't feel like I had a come down. I still feel I'm up there and I'm excited, and not really answering your question. I don't know. It didn't seem to bother me. Amanda could probably respond better to that on my behalf, but I think it was such an amazing experience, and I know that, and I don't know if I'll do this one again, and I probably would because I had such a great time.
I think it's a huge issue, massive, and I struggled with it big time. And I think a lot of cyclists have struggled with it. We've never really talked about it. Now, I remember as just a young boy meeting an 80-year-old former cyclist, and he was an alcoholic. And I sort of thought, oh, he's just become an alcoholic. In fact, he told me the story. He said, when I used to race, what we'd do is we'd have a raw egg in some whiskey at night time, you see, and then, or 2 raw eggs and whiskey at night time. And he said, eventually I cut it down to one egg and whiskey. And then, then finally I cut it down to just whiskey. And then I used to also have a whiskey in the morning. so eventually he's just on whiskey. And I just treat it as a bit of a joke. But now I think about it, I think it's a big issue. And I'm not a psychologist, but I struggled with it big time, really big time. And I think that was when Oppie called me aside, and it sort of launched into me a bit when I started talking to him about records that he thought, now you've been stupid. It was a lot to do with, well, okay, I've now set 6 world records in ultramarathon cycling. There's nothing much. I've got to go off and do something else. And this idea of riding, 130,000 Ks in a year to break the world 1 year record, it sort of seemed to be like the logical next thing. But as Oppie said, no, you're going to have to move on, Rod, in your life and do something else. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Look, I think we might wrap it up there. There is further stories, more adventure and things within the exhibition here. And currently a lot of the stories here are available online at the WA Historical Cycle Club website. Look, I'd like to thank Rod. Late question from the back.
No, it's not a question.
Oh.
In the Sunday Times magazine today, there's a report on a bloke who's trying to set a record down in Nullarbor in about 2.5 days.
Yeah. Wow. Jack Thompson.
It's pretty fast. It's over 1,000 kilometres.
So,
thought it might be of interest.
Yeah. So not only have we got opportunities to read the past histories of these adventurers, we're just talking then about the Mundabiddi attempt. Is that Jack Thompson?
Yes, Jack Thompson.
He calls himself Jack the Ultra Cyclist, or Jack Rides Far. That'd be an interesting one to watch. Other things that would be interesting to watch online would be the DOT, or for the India Pacific, and we will watch that one, all of the DOT watches. So there is plenty more online, and the WA Historical Cycle Club will help you with that. But most of all, can I have a round of applause for Rod and Colin? Thank you very much. And if these gents you'd like to hang around, there may be questions available, but I think you may.
If there's a whiskey, definitely.
Does anyone have the egg? Right, thank you very much.